You're listening to
CRST,
the podcast
from Bryn Mawr Communications.
This podcast is sponsored by Bausch and Lomb. Doctors Waring and Chu are paid consultants for Bausch and Lomb.
Hello, and welcome to this special edition episode of CRST, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. George Waring from the Waring Vision Institute here in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And I'm here with my good friend and respected colleague, Dr. Ralph Chu, to discuss the latest clinical research and real-world experience on the use of an advanced excimer laser to correct myopia and myopic astigmatism. Ralph, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thank you, George. It's really an honor to be on this podcast with you and just share some insights that we both have had through the clinical trial for the Teneo and also in the real world. As I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, I am a cataract and refractive surgeon who's up here now in my 26th year of practice. And so this is really an honor, and I'm looking forward to learning from each other tonight.
Well, I totally agree and share the sentiments. I love getting to do this type of activity with you. And I also learned so much from you when we get to do this. So for the audience, Dr. Chu and I were both clinical investigators for the FDA trial for the Technolas Teneo 317 excimer laser platform for myopia and myopic astigmatism. This is Bausch and Lomb's latest entry into the excimer laser market, and it's actually the first excimer laser platform to gain FDA approval in well over a decade and a half. And we're going to refer to this as the Teneo for the remainder of our session. But Ralph, we were among the first U.S. surgeons in the United States to obtain the Teneo in our clinics after FDA approval. And at the Waring Vision Institute, we had the true distinct honor to perform the first U.S. commercial cases post FDA approval. So it's going to be really neat to compare notes, see how our experiences compare now that we've got a number of procedures and the data to reflect on relative to the FDA clinical trial that we both participated in. And so with that, Ralph, I'd like you to start by giving us a little background and maybe some context, how you've seen this project unfold. We were involved in this in the early development of the protocols and as the trials came to fruition and all throughout the FDA trial. But more importantly, sort of the niche that it fills in the ophthalmic market, given the first FDA approval in such a long time. What are your thoughts and experience?
Yes, George, that's what's most exciting about this for me is that, it's been nearly 10 years since we started looking at the design of the trial and even just starting to try to think about introducing a new laser into the U.S. market. And I think it's really important to distinguish between the U.S. market and the outside U.S. market. Outside the U.S., there are so many new lasers that have been introduced over the last 20 years. And that's one of the things that really excited me that, technology does improve and, being part of that and introducing things so we as U.S. surgeons have access to similar technologies available outside the U.S., I think was really important. I think that's why we really wanted to be involved. We knew from OUS data that this laser works, and that was really confidence building when we started looking at integrating this into our practice that, there was proven technologies and techniques that we could deliver to our patients right here. And so patients really resonated with that, and it really took off in terms of recruitment and even integration once we've had it, FDA approved. Love to hear what your thoughts on this as well, George.
Ralph, I totally agree. And I think most of our listeners would agree that, we often suffer as U.S. surgeons on what's going on in the free world. And that requires faith, patience, and understanding. The innovation pipeline remain rich, and we've seen efficiencies over the decade, our FDA approval processes for devices. And so it's really wonderful to finally have access and see some of these approvals come across the finish line, particularly after such a drought. I mean, well over 15 years since we've had an excimer approval in the US. It's just amazing to me with the single best studied procedure in the human body, that is LASIK. So you can only share my excitement in having access to contemporary technology with such an extraordinary life-changing procedure. And as you said so well, we benefited from the understanding of the safety and efficacy OUS and further iterations. And there's just and but the neat thing is now that we have access to the technology, there's so much more that can be done. And you and I have had the real opportunity and pleasure to peek under the hood to understand what else is happening at OUS. And the pipeline is so rich and we have so much to look forward to. And so it's just great to have the foundational technology and with our initial indications of myopia, myopic astigmatism. And again, for the listeners, every FDA study on an excimer laser, to the best of my knowledge, save one, always goes through sequential indications when you gain approval. So it's typical to start with these initial approvals. This is just really exciting. What piqued your interest in terms of choosing this laser from for commercial use, and how did it sort of fit in your practice, and what niche did you see it filling?
Yeah, we've been fortunate. When I started my practice back in '99, it was only two choices. So I started with a Visex Excimer, which is a broad beam laser. And now we have four lasers in the practice. But what I really loved about this technology was the speed of the tracker, the speed of the treatment. And that's not to do more surgeries per day, even though that can be something that is beneficial. I just think, it contributes, and I think we'll see later in this talk your real world data, but we found that the results were more consistent. I think it's easier to manage patient anxiety with such a fast laser. And then with so many lasers in the practice, room was an issue. And so having a nice size, like a nice small footprint that didn't take up a lot of space, is a real thing when you're owning your own practice, as we both know. And space is a premium. And so it was nice to have such a very attractive looking laser fit into a nice size space that could be really utilized clinically. And then in the trial, third thing, is just the results. I mean, looking OUS, the results were amazing, and the future things that this platform can offer was very attractive to me. And the commitment of a company like Bausch to this space in a challenging time, looking in the future, investing in the United States was something that I wanted to support. And I knew our friends and colleagues outside the US were doing some amazing things with multiple treatments that, we hope to continue to evolve in the US market.
I really appreciate that, and I share a lot of those sentiments too. And just to touch on some of the highlights and echo some of the thoughts, space, there's real efficiency in space, right? So we're all excited about this is the fastest available laser, excimer laser in the United States, and there are now two other 500 hertz repetition rate lasers available that are FDA approved, but this actually has the fastest ablation amongst any of them, to the best of my knowledge, and I believe the reason is part of the beam profile. So this is a truncated Gaussian beam that is something we're not used to understanding or thinking about, but essentially it still realizes the radial ablation efficiency that is most wavefront optimized type platforms enjoy. But this does not add anything additional that doesn't need to be added that we're not going to benefit from. So not all 500 hertz repetition rate for the pulse frequency are the same. So yes, there's efficiency, and I agree totally. This doesn't mean more surgeries per day, but we actually introduced the first 500 hertz laser to the US. Again, that was a long time ago now, and we did see wow factors and quicker recovery. And I'm getting glimpses of that again with this technology. Why is that? Well, less time for things to dry out. I mean, is what I think. And I'm sure you agree. You look at your patients post-op right afterwards, and you can barely see that they really had anything done. And that translates just like you're looking in, they're looking out. So there's a lot to be said for that. But like you said, space is a premium. But I think there's a real efficiency to space too. It's a financial, you're paying for it. There's only so much of it to go around. We need to optimize the flows to make them comfortable. We have different technologies that we need to fit in these rooms. So that really matters. So a nice, small, compact, modern design there's an efficiency to that. And then also supporting the group that's supporting the surgeons. I mean, that's a bold move to step up in a time like this when it's essentially been a desert of innovation for excimer laser technology in the US and go for it. And we want to support that. We want to get behind it. And just like you, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And we now get to benefit from all that hard work. So yeah, I think that's really, really well said. So how's it playing out? I mean, what are your kind of, let's talk about sort of first impressions, maybe yourself or your staff. What do you think?
Yeah, first of all, we learned a lot from you. You were the first in the US to actually perform this commercially and in the trial. And one of the things that I learned from you was that it is really easy for your staff. And that really matters. We've both seen some of these, lasers that are available outside the US that can do different types of ablations and things. And it gets really complex. And even as an experienced surgeon doing this for over 25 years, I'm worried about errors, transcription errors, errors that can happen about choosing which refraction I'm going to use. And what's amazing from the trial and in clinical practice was the ease of use. There was no nomogram used in the trial, and the results were incredible, which you're going to share later. But I think that's been great for my staff. They love it. Like chart prepping, that takes a lot of staff time. And, the surgeon on the day of surgery checking over the refractions and which one is entered into the laser. Those are real world things that, it might be really, really sexy to have a complex ablation pattern and different guidance systems. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of other variables that come involved in surgery, environmental conditions, human healing factors. So, I think it's been amazing, amazingly simple to integrate into this in with your staff. And that to me can't be minimized because it also minimizes errors, which I think is really another first impression. So thank you for teaching us that. But I think that's what we've lived when we started using this laser.
Well, listen, I totally agree. And when we think about what does this bring to the table, perhaps that we didn't have access to previously, and I'm sure, and we've talked about this through our journey in this technology development, is the sheer excitement of the simplicity of it. I mean, if we reflect on other innovations and outside of ophthalmology, and we're inherently technical as a personality and as a as a field, you just think about the things that just work. They're intuitive. They kind of work for you. They think for you. And I mean, you just kind of go down the list of those technologies that really changed the game. And and I'm sure you went through this too, when we said, wait a second, there's no nomogram, and we're going to be treating 10 diopters of myopia for a broad age range, and there's no nomogram. Well, that'll be interesting. And we remember doing these very first treatments, and you do a lot of FDA trials, and you know those moments where you're like, well, we need to figure this out, and we're going to do this right. And I'm sure you shared my surprise when we kept seeing the results unfold, not only in our own patients, but then once we start to see the data unlock and have access to the statistics and we'll go through some of that. But wow, I mean, geez, just that alone is a game changer, right? Transcription error, there's real time efficiency with the nomogram without the requirement for a nomogram, without the mental gymnastics on busy days to try to figure all that out. So very excited about that efficiency, less chance for transcription error. You said it all. And just even the user interface is just lovely. It's just like a big, easy screen with, sort of the red light, green light, and, you're treating off your manifest and you plug it in and you go. Wow. Amazing. And there's a real wow factor for the patients, of course, but for the staff, isn't that fun to have the wow factor for the staff and the surgeons and all that. So yeah, I totally agree. So right. So you've enjoyed the ease of use, not only in the the units are interfaced, but the not needing physician adjustments or nomograms, having that essentially built in. Anything else that has sort of stood out to you in your kind of initial experiences and why this is unique?
Um, as a business owner now for the last over 25 years, I think one thing I've learned is it's not just the doctor part, which is the confidence in the outcomes, which is the first and foremost thing that you just described. But I think it's also just having the service and the support of a company behind that product. You and I both know when you buy a large capital piece of equipment like that, it's a 10, 15-year commitment. So, and look, if you bought an Excimer, it's 20 years before you get, the first FDA approved new one. So having a company that's committed to the service and having them be responsive and kind to the staff, I think has been critical. That's all I've seen from the time of install to the time of initialization and training to the time of it's never broken down, but just service, changing gases and things like that are realities of having an excimer laser that I think maybe some newer or younger surgeons are just looking at the fancy charts and graphs on outcome data. But when you really want to be a business person and own one, I think there's a 360-degree view that you have to pay attention to, and I think that's been really positive from the company side that supports this laser.
Yeah, well said, Rob. What's your hunch? What's about, kind of your personal outcomes and how are patients doing and what are your thoughts behind how they're doing?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that too, but it just reminded me of something too about why I'm still excited about this platform is that it's the future. And you had mentioned that before. And when we're sitting in, planning meetings, I mean, some of the technologies coming out, which, I won't mention on this podcast, but all the things that, we don't have right now in the US are being planned. And that's super exciting for me. Building upon these outcomes, to answer your question, um, our real world data, which I'm dying to see yours. So I think this will probably be the segue into that. But I think our experience has been really, really positive. I mean, I think, you know, uh, no nomogram. Like that we have the confidence that when we type in a refraction, that we're actually going to get the outcome and the target that we targeted. Now it's still laser surgery. We're in a very dry environment up here in Minneapolis, so I can't say we have zero enhancements. That would be actually unrealistic. But we're very, very happy with the outcomes, and everything is met and beyond our expectations.
I'm glad to hear that. And, I figured that's what you would be saying, but it's always validating to hear, somebody that I respect so much share in the similar experiences and define these intersections of our experiences. It's, there is a validation to that and it's fun to get to share that with our audience too. Um,
I'm dying to see your real world data. I mean, you got your first cases here because I think as people who've done trials, both of us, we get skeptical after a while. Like, hey, the FDA data always looks, you know, really, really good. How does it work in the real world in many surgeons' hands? So I'd love to see. I know you just did a study, I think, George.
so Ralph, let me kick this off with a little background maybe of the FDA trial and some of the standout data points that we observed. So first off, we all know that there's the safety and efficacy endpoints were met. So we'll take that at face value, but there were some superlatives for the peer-reviewed literature that we have not seen published previously. And you and I went on to publish this work in the Journal of Refractive Surgery. So, for example, uh, patients post-operatively were 3 times more likely to be 2016 or better compared to the pre-op state with glasses or contacts. That's a standout. Over a third of eyes at 9 months gained one or more line of corrected distance visual acuity. A third. That's a standout. Um, the One of my favorite data points, I think, if you had to remember one thing from our podcast, would be that the manifest refractive spherical equivalent at 9 months for all eyes was minus 0.04.
And I don't want to interrupt, but what's amazing is this is across multiple sites, different environments. You're in South Carolina, I'm in Minnesota. The environment is different, and the results speak for themselves. It's pretty amazing.
Well, and to add to that, Ralph, this is close to 350 eyes. And from -1 to -10 myopia and up to 3 diopters of myopic astigmatism with no nomogram adjustment allowed, no physician adjustment, and -0.04 MRSE at 9 months. It's just, I mean, it's impressive. But beyond that, the superlatives continue. There was basically, compared to the preoperative state, improvement in things that have been historically considered problematic with laser vision correction, such as difficulty driving at night or difficulty driving in difficult conditions. So we were able to publish there was an improvement in driving at night, an improvement in driving in difficult conditions relative to glasses or contact lenses. Likewise, the dogma is, well, what about glare and halos? Starburst. Well, this statistically significant again, whereas there was less dysphotopsia compared to preoperative state, and with LASIK compared to glasses or contact lenses. There was a fourfold satisfaction with your vision after LASIK compared to glasses or contact lenses. Contrast sensitivity was statistically better than with LASIK with this platform than glasses or contact lenses. So, to the best of my knowledge, the vast majority of that's never been reported. And that is automatically, with no nomogram and that group, really means that we're onto something new. And and that's where I kind of want to like to get your thoughts on just why are we seeing these results? I mean, what is it that's different about this that we're now transcending with statistical significance glasses and contact lenses with better subjective reporting, better patient reported validated questionnaires, less side effects than glasses or contact lenses, better satisfaction, and the best reported outcomes that I've seen published. What are your thoughts on that?
I think to me there's two parts of that question. I think that the debate on why I think could be a whole other podcast, and we can talk about that. But as I was watching you and hearing you present that, what's amazing is I'm old enough to remember the Visex and the Summit trials coming out, and it was about 20/20 and loss of best corrected, and now we're talking about quality of life issues and quality of vision. And so that's another reason to look at some of these newer platforms, like this platform, because we're now, as refractive surgeons, we're not just responsible for Snellen acuity. We're looking for results that, allow people to function safely and better in their daily activities like night driving, less glare and halo, quality of contrast sensitivity. So that was really attractive to me, and you could feel that. Like this is not something that you have to measure and tease out in the clinical lane. You could feel that in your patients. I mean, we've both done a lot of refractive surgery, and you can tell that there's a difference between 20/20, between patients. There's like a really, real happy, excited 20/20, and that's what these patients are. And I'm not even trying to sound overly promotional. This is really our own personal clinical experience with these patients. I think it's a confluence of everything. I think that, I've learned from you, like more of the scientific reasons why these ablation profiles and things and, different tracking mechanisms may contribute to better results. But I think it's a confluence of all of that, as more of a, clinically minded, practitioner. I just think everything comes together, ablation profiles, tracking, speed of treatment to kind of contribute to these results. But I think they speak for themselves. I mean, I'd love to learn more from you about that.
I think you said it very well, Ralph. And I don't know the answer either exactly. I suspect it is a confluence of factors and high speed repetition rates, but we have that, we have that in the US. Look, we've got incredible platforms, we've got incredible results. So the needle is so hard to move. And when you do, wow, how extraordinary is that with statistical significance now with peer reviewed references? And so when I reflect on this and say, okay, well, what's different? And with no nomogram, externally, how can we get these results? Well, what's different about the platform? It's, my knowledge, it's the only available Z tracking system available in the US. So the tracker is the fastest tracker available in the US. You have to have a fast tracker when the repetition rate's that fast. So this is 3x of the repetition rate. But the Z tracking is interesting, and it's it is a little nuanced. You kind of takes a little getting used to it first. But I mean, if you just think about it, it's being real-time calibrated for ablation. So it's when the tissue is being ablated, it's calibrating for that and accounting for that. So you're getting Z, not radial ablation efficiencies, but this is Z efficiencies, and we've never had that before. So I personally think that may have something to do with it. But I imagine it's multifactorial, like you said. But it sure is exciting, isn't it?
It really is. And the future is also bright.
Yeah.
See, like how did your results, let's see how that lays against these FDA trial results. I think it's pretty exciting.
Sure. So we looked at this. We always like to look at our own data in addition to the FDA data, and I do believe it serves a purpose. So we looked at close to our, I think it was our first 50 LASIK eyes commercial use, and we ended up evaluating. I think we had 47 evaluable eyes of 25 patients around 33 years old, pretty even split male and female. And then we just looked at kind of the primary parameters, uncorrected and corrected distance visual acuities, MRSE, and astigmatism. We did not use any nomogram adjustment. This was straight out of the box, no physician adjustments. And kind of went from there. And just to kind of share the top line findings, perhaps, we looked at our 1 month data, and the mean uncorrected visual acuity was minus 0.07 logmar, plus minus 0.07. That translates to about 2015 across all eyes. And the mean post-op manifest refractive spherical equivalent, again, that was probably my favorite data point from the FDA studies. I was real excited to see how ours was going to stack up, was minus 0.16 with a standard deviation of about zero point 0.3 diopters. So pretty close to the FDA study of minus 0.04. And again, just some of the best results we've seen in our practice to date. And then we looked at mean post-operative cylinder, and over 80% were within plus or minus a quarter diopter. And so again, that's just some of the best data that we've gotten to experience commercially to date. So we still consider this relatively early results, but I think they're important enough and serve sort of an unofficial validation of the results that we saw in the FDA study, but done in our single center consecutively in our first series of cases. So we were really encouraged, and obviously we'll have additional data as this unfolds over time. But we do really appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. We'll be presenting that data here at a number of the upcoming society meetings.
Yeah, I think that's really meaningful. And from somebody who's, been in the trenches here with you, I respect the courage that it takes to kind of put out that first real world clinical data. I mean, that's your earliest experience. This is not about, you know, 1,000 eyes in already. This is just, hey, let's just see what it looks like. All comers. How did my team do? And those are really, really awesome results. And I think that's meaningful. I think when you're like a younger surgeon looking at this stuff, you say, wow, look at the FDA results. And sometimes, with our new technologies, you can be disappointed because, like, wait, my results aren't matching up to what the FDA, because those patients are heavily screened. And to see that you just took some all comers, you just say, "Yeah, let's just take our next 50 eyes and just follow them." It's incredible. And so I think it takes a lot of courage. I commend you for that. And just sharing that. I mean, it's a big deal. So, and it's meaningful. Really think people listening to this should say, hey, the FDA trial is one thing. All the lasers look great, but this actually plays out in the real world. And I think we'll start seeing more of that as more of these lasers are, more investigators are gathering their data and trying to share that. So thank you for doing that for all of us, George.
Well, Ralph, thanks. That means a lot to me coming from you. And I mean, I share your enthusiasm for the platform. As I've expressed, I'm especially impressed by the peer review data that you and I co-authored, and I think that's really good for our industry. I think that's really good for confidence. I think it's really good for the public. I think it's good for the media. There's just a whole lot to be said to help support and help people understand the miracle of vision correction with modern day excimer lasers and how we can improve contrast sensitivity, improve nighttime driving, improve quality of vision, that is better than glasses or contact lenses. And that I think is what I'm most excited about, and improve best spectacle correction. I mean, these are things we've transcended what can be done with glasses or contact lenses with a modern day excimer laser. And that I think, the time has really come for the public to understand that.
I think that's so meaningful. As I'm listening to you say that, I'm just like, it's really gone beyond Snellen acuity. I mean, I think that's, basic refractive surgery is can I get the patient to a low Snellen acuity line, 20/20 or better. But now we're talking about functional vision, and there's reported data. I mean, I'm part of the trial. I'm using this laser every day, and it just blew my mind listening to you that, wait, we have published data, clinical data about contrast, nighttime driving, functional things that really matter to our patients. Patients don't know like, hey, 93% got 20/16 or better. They just like, hey, how well can I see when I'm driving my kids in the snowstorm back to their school? And so we just have to have that confidence that we're backed by this clinical trial data. And this is just the beginning. I think that's what we are not allowed to talk about because it's not FDA approved yet. But this platform is only going to get better, and have more and more indications. And that's why I'm very excited about the future for this platform, and appreciative to be involved.
Ralph, I totally agree. And again, I share your enthusiasm. Just to put a bow on it, patients were approximately 4 times more satisfied with their vision after LASIK with the Bausch& Lomb Teneo excimer laser compared to glasses or contact lenses preoperatively. And we've just not seen data published like this before. And so I think there's a real story to be told here. And that's why I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to do this in a public format, because I want vision correction surgeons and the public to have access to really the concise summary and bullet points of what's so meaningful about this data that we had the true honor to publish together regarding the outcomes with the Teneo excimer laser for the treatment of myopia and myopic astigmatism. And so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I agree, George, and always enjoy our conversations, learn a lot, and I think we shared some really important pearls for our listeners today. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this with you, and look forward to growing refractive surgery together in the years to come.
Here, here. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. And until next time, you have a great night, and thanks for listening to our special edition CRST podcast. That was really, really, really wonderful. Have a great afternoon and great evening.
Indications for use. The Technolos Teneo 317 Model 2 is indicated for laser-assisted in situ keratomeleusis LASIK in patients for the reduction or elimination of myopic astigmatism up to -10 diopters MRSE with sphere between -1 diopter and cylinder between 0.00 and -3 diopters. Patients who are 22 years of age or older. Patients must have stable refraction in the last 12 months as documented by previous clinical recordings, i.e. the spherical and cylindrical portions of the manifest distance refraction have not progressed at a rate of more than 0.5 diopters per year prior to the baseline examination in the eyes to be treated. Warning: danger of injury due to failure to observe the patient selection criteria. Failure to observe the contraindications and potential adverse effects may result in serious permanent patient injury. The usage of the laser system is limited to a specific field of applications. Observe the contraindications and potential adverse effects listed in the user manual before selecting a patient and starting any treatment. Contraindications. Contraindications of the Technolos Teneo 317 Model 2 include patients with any type of active connective tissue disease or autoimmune disease, with signs of keratoconus, abnormal corneal topography, and degenerations of the structure of the cornea, including but not limited to pellucid marginal degeneration, with significant dry eyes, severe dry eye syndrome. If patients have severely dry eyes, LASIK may increase the dryness. This may or may not go away. Severe eye dryness may delay healing of the flap or interfere with the surface of the eye after surgery. It may result in poor vision after LASIK, for whom the combination of their baseline corneal thickness and the planned operative parameters for the LASIK procedure would result in less than 250 microns of residual corneal thickness from corneal endothelium, with uncontrolled diabetes, with uncontrolled glaucoma, with active eye infections or active inflammation, with recent herpes eyes infection or problems resulting from past infections, with known sensitivity to medications used for standard LASIK surgery. Potential risks and side effects: miscreated flap, subconjunctival hemorrhage or bleeding, wrinkles in the flap that may require a flap lift, corneal erosion abrasion, epithelial defect, elevated IOP, debris or foreign body under flap, epithelial ingrowth under flap, debilitating visual symptoms especially at night, decreased or fluctuating visual acuity, decreased ability to see in low light conditions, light sensitivity, dry eye syndrome, inadequate treatment result, regression, corneal damage, posterior vitreous detachment or retinal detachment, floaters or vascular accidents, foreign body sensation or pain, initial postoperative days, also potentially including chronic eye pain that is resistant to therapy referred to as neuropathic pain, infection, inflammation, CTK, central toxic keratopathy, medication intolerance, ptosis, cataract, ocular penetration, potential risk of psychological harm. This is not all you need to know. Please see the user manual for a complete list of safety information, including a full list of contraindications, warnings, precautions, and risks. Caution: federal U.S. law restricts this device to sale by or on the order of a physician.